What if you could take the single best thing from every Mortal Kombat game and combine it into one game? Just think about that for a second. You could have the original game's tournament, MK2's insane amount of finishers, Deception's Conquest mode, Shaolin Monks' co-op mode, MK9's legendary story mode, and on. It sounds like the perfect Mortal Kombat game, right? Well, that's exactly what we're gonna build today. I'm taking something from every single mainline Mortal Kombat game and Frankensteining them together to create what I think would be the ultimate MK experience. And I'm not just talking about gameplay, we're building everything: the story, the roster, the modes, the combat, the customization, everything. And by the end of this video, we're going to have an entire Mortal Kombat game built on from the best ideas the franchise has given us over the last 30 years. Now, I'm sure by the end of today's video, you guys are going to be like, yeah, you're wrong about this, and I would change this. But to be honest, I want you guys to say that. That's good, because I want to know what you would change. But before we create the perfect Mortal Kombat game, we have to go all the way back to where it started. Mortal Kombat 1, the original arcade version. And for the original Mortal Kombat, I'm taking something that sounds pretty simple, but I think it would completely change the direction of our perfect Mortal Kombat, and that's the original tournament for the storyline direction. Now, I know that doesn't sound like some groundbreaking feature, but think about what made the original Mortal Kombat 1 so interesting. The entire game was built around this idea of warriors entering a tournament to determine the fate of Earthrealm. You had Liu Kang representing the Shaolin, Johnny Cage trying to prove himself, Sonya hunting Kano, Scorpion coming after Sub-Zero, and Shang Tsung standing at the top of this entire thing. Everyone had their own reason for being there, but they were all brought together by this one tournament. And honestly, I think Mortal Kombat should go way back to that, because as MK1 sadly shown, we had, stuff like alternate timelines, time travel titans, multiverses. We had characters fighting alternate versions of themselves, and at this point it's tiring. I wouldn't be surprised if Mortal Kombat 13 had Raiden fighting like a version of himself that was like a Target employee or something. And don't get me wrong, I love how crazy Mortal Kombat's story has become and all the lore surrounding it, but sometimes I think less is more. So for our perfect Mortal Kombat, the story is going to revolve around one central idea: a Mortal Kombat tournament. Earthrealm's greatest warriors are brought together to defend their realm. Outworld sends its champions. Everyone has their own special personal, reasons for entering, but underneath all of that, there's a much bigger conflict happening. And this also gives us a perfect excuse to bring everything together from, different eras. You could have the classic characters, you could have 3D era characters, you could have some new characters, and they're all fighting for the same reason: to win Mortal Kombat. And I think that gives our game a much stronger foundation than immediately jumping into like another universe-ending crisis. Start small, make us care about the characters, make the tournament feel important, and then as the story progresses, we could slowly reveal that there's something bigger happening behind the scenes. So the first piece of our Frankenstein Mortal Kombat is finally locked in: a classic Mortal Kombat tournament as the foundation for the story. But now that we've got the tournament, we need to figure out what happens when you actually win a fight, because if we're building the perfect Mortal Kombat, there's no way I'm giving you one way to finish your opponent, and that's where Mortal Kombat 2 comes in. Because if the original Mortal Kombat gave us fatalities, okay, Mortal Kombat 2 took that idea and basically said, okay, what if we gave people more ways to ruin someone's day? And that's why Mortal Kombat 2, I'm taking the finisher options. Because one of the things I love about Mortal Kombat is that finishing an opponent doesn't always mean doing the exact same fatality every single time. I mean, you could hit them with a fatality, yes, but you could also do a babality, you could do a friendship, and over the years we've gotten some more like animalities, brutalities, stage fatalities, quitalities. There's been a lot of ways to make your opponent regret ever pressing that start button, and for the perfect Mortal Kombat, I want all of that. I don't want to choose between, fatalities and friendships. I don't want certain characters getting cool finishers while others are stuck with some basic options. I want a huge selection of finishers that actually makes you want to master every character. Like, imagine beating someone up and getting a full menu of options. Like, you could go for like a classic fatality, or you could hit them with something completely ridiculous like a friendship or a babality. Yes, Mortal Kombat is violent, but it's also ridiculous, and sometimes it's absolutely hilarious. So our perfect Mortal Kombat needs to embrace embrace all of it. And this also gives us something that's really important for our Frankenstein perfect Mortal Kombat game, and that's variety. Because to be honest, I love friendships, I love babalities. I know, Mortal Kombat 2 didn't have the complete variety that other games had, but if I had to choose something from Mortal Kombat 2, I was hanging on either the secrets or, the finisher options, and I feel like the finisher options are a little bit better. But there's still one more problem. Our game needs to be faster. If we're gonna build the ultimate Mortal Kombat, I don't want every fight feeling like we're taking turns politely hitting each other, and that's where Mortal Kombat 3 comes in. I'm gonna be combining Mortal Kombat 3, or Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and Mortal Kombat Trilogy all in one, okay? Because something that Mortal Kombat 3 did completely changed the pace of Mortal Kombat. It gave us the run mechanic. And for our perfect Mortal Kombat, I'm taking that. The run button might sound like a pretty small addition, but it completely changed the way how Mortal Kombat was played. I know it was a bit iffy, but when you have that, suddenly you weren't just standing across your opponent waiting for your turn to attack. You could chase them down, you could close the distance, you could stay aggressive, and it made the entire game feel faster and more intense. And that's exactly what our Frankenstein Mortal Kombat needs, because we already established that this is going to be a massive tournament with a ridiculous amount of finishers, so I want the actual fighting to feel like these characters are fighting for their lives. I don't want slow defensive matches where both players are just standing across the screen staring at each other. I want you to be able to get in there and pressure your opponent. If they try to run away, chase them. If they make a mistake, punish them. And when you finally corner them, well, okay, that's where those finishers we talked about come in, right? Because you're gonna cook them, you know what I mean? And there's another reason why I think the run mechanic fits perfectly with everything we've already chosen. The tournament gives us the story, the finishers, that gives us the personality, and the run mechanic gives us the speed. But there's another reason I'm choosing this, because when we get to some of the later games, we're going to be adding even more modern gameplay elements, and I want this Frankenstein game to feel like it evolved over time. We're talking, the best ideas from the old game and combining that with the best ideas from the newer games. So yes, our perfect Mortal Kombat is going to be fast, it's going to be aggressive. It might lead into maybe MKX or something, That's one of the best gameplay games that, the community agrees on, and, the run mechanic started it all. And if you're playing against me and you decide to back up against the entire screen, well, I'm coming after you. I'm gonna run. You're not getting away from me. But now we've got the gameplay starting to take shape, and we got the story starting to take shape, but there's one thing missing. The game needs to feel like Mortal Kombat. And for that, we're gonna be taking one of the most underrated games in the entire franchise, Mortal Kombat 4. So to recap, we got the foundation, we've got the tournament, we've got multiple ways to finish our opponents, and we've got gameplay faster with the run mechanic. But there's something else that I think that is just important as the gameplay. Obviously the atmosphere, the soul. Now Mortal Kombat 4 is definitely one of the more divisive games in the franchise, but one thing I think Mortal Kombat 4 absolutely nailed was its tone. And that's why I chose its tone and its atmosphere. This game was dark. It was serious. You had villains like Shinnok, Quan Chi, Goro, the Netherrealm. You had all that stuff. Everything had this grim, almost gothic feeling to it. And that's what I'm taking from Mortal Kombat 4, the dark atmosphere. Because when I think of modern Mortal Kombat, I think that they sometimes forget how important that darker identity is. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the humor. I love Johnny Cage just being Johnny Cage. I love the ridiculous characters and the stupid fatalities. But that's what makes Mortal Kombat Mortal Kombat. But underneath all of that, I want the arenas to feel like places where people are actually fighting for their lives. I want the lighting to be darker. I want the music to feel ominous. I want the environments to have personality, and most importantly, I want Mortal Kombat to feel like Mortal Kombat before the first punch is even thrown, just by the main menu and the soundtrack. Imagine combining that classic MK4 atmosphere with modern graphics, a massive tournament taking place in this dark, brutal environment with characters from every era of the franchise walking into them. You could have that ridiculous comedy during the fights, but the world around them still feels serious, and I think that balance would be perfect, because Mortal Kombat doesn't need to choose between being dark and being funny. It could be both. It could have Johnny Cage making some stupid joke while there's literally a guy getting sacrificed in the background. That's Mortal Kombat. So our Frankenstein is starting to take shape. You know, we got the story, the finishers, the speed, and now we've got the atmosphere. But we're only working with that basic foundation so far, because if we're really going to build the perfect Mortal Kombat, we need to make these characters play completely differently from one another. And for that, we're going to Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, the next game. Deadly Alliance introduced one of the most interesting gameplay ideas Mortal Kombat has ever had, in my opinion. A lot of people don't like it, but this is the 3 fighting styles for every character. And this is one feature that I absolutely want in our perfect Mortal Kombat. You could call these maybe like the 3 variations, or an early system of the MKX variations. Because imagine taking a modern Mortal Kombat character and giving them 3 completely different ways to play. You could have one style focused on speed, maybe like another focused on heavy attacks, and another focused on weapons or special techniques. And suddenly, learning one character isn't just about learning their basic moveset. You're learning how that character works in 3 completely different ways. And I think that could make the roster feel so much deeper, you know, because remember, we're eventually going to have a massive roster from all different eras of Mortal Kombat. And I don't want a huge roster just for the sake of saying, okay, look guys, we have 60 characters. I want those characters to actually feel unique. And 3 fighting styles could absolutely help accomplish that. Imagine someone picking up Scorpion and playing him completely different from maybe another Scorpion player. One player might focus on his traditional ninja style, and maybe another one might build around his aggressive rushdown or something, and another might use maybe like a more defensive style. You know, you have the same character but completely different experiences. And this also gives competitive players more room to experiment. You could have different matchups depending on which style you're using. You could find your own combination, and you could spend hours mastering a character without feeling like you've already seen everything that they do. Now obviously I'm not saying that we should just copy Deadly Alliance's system exactly, because let's be honest, there's a reason why people hate the fighting style system. But what I'm doing is I'm taking the idea and I'm modernizing it. Make all 3 styles viable, give each one a real purpose, and make switching between them feel smooth. Because now we've got a game where the fighting is fast, the characters have depth, and every match could play differently. But we're about to make this game a lot bigger than just a fighting game. Because what if you could actually just leave the arcade ladder and explore the world of Mortal Kombat? And that's where Mortal Kombat Deception comes in. Because for Deception, I'm taking one of the most ambitious things Mortal Kombat has ever done, and that's the Conquest mode. And if you never played Deception's Conquest mode, you are seriously missing out. Because this wasn't just some little side mode where you walk around a small area and fight a few enemies. It was a full-on Mortal Kombat adventure. You could explore different realms, you could talk to characters, complete missions, side missions, and you could learn about the world and unlock things. And you actually felt like you were traveling through the Mortal Kombat universe, visiting the different realms. And that's something I desperately want in our perfect Mortal Kombat, because at this point we've built what sounds like an incredible fighting game, to be honest. And I don't want this to just be a fighting game. I want Mortal Kombat to feel like a complete gaming experience, like even for the casual players that want to play a good single player mode. Because imagine your Conquest journey starting in Earthrealm, then maybe traveling to Outworld, then maybe to the Netherrealm, and visiting all these iconic locations and actually interacting with iconic Mortal Kombat characters who live there. You could run into Scorpion, maybe Sub-Zero, maybe even Shao Kahn. You could stumble across some random NPC who gives you a completely ridiculous side quest, because apparently that's just what happens in Mortal Kombat according to Deception's Conquest mode. But it's funny, it's fun. And the best part is that this mode could actually expand the lore without forcing you to sit through like another 3-hour cinematic for those who like RPG stuff. You could explore the world yourself, maybe even create your own character and discover secrets, and you could find hidden characters, you could unlock costumes and finishers, and maybe you could have a completely optional side story or something, maybe like a side quest line or something. Basically, I want Mortal Kombat's version of an RPG, and I think this is where our Frankenstein game really starts becoming something special, because now we have a competitive fighting game, we have a cinematic tournament story, and now we have an entire adventure mode to explore when we're done fighting. But there's still one thing missing, because if we're going to have this massive adventure, I don't want you exploring it alone. Maybe have like a co-op. I want to call my friend, hand him a controller and say, alright, okay, let's go beat the hell out of some Tarkans or something. And this is where Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks comes in. Because if we're already giving our game a massive Conquest mode, I want another mode that's specifically built around playing with a friend, and Shaolin Monks is perfect for that. I'm taking the co-op adventure aspect of Shaolin Monks, because Shaolin Monks prove that Mortal Kombat doesn't have to be limited to one-on-one fighting. You could take characters like Liu Kang and Kung Lao and actually run through the Mortal Kombat universe together. You're fighting enemies, exploring areas, solving little environmental challenges or puzzles, and fighting bosses, and causing absolute chaos with another person sitting next to you. Or maybe, this is the modern day, maybe co-op, right? Online co-op. And that's something I desperately want in our perfect Mortal Kombat. Imagine taking that same concept and expanding it with an entire roster. You could have two friends pick their absolute favorite characters and play through an entire Mortal Kombat adventure together. So now our perfect Mortal Kombat isn't just a fighting game anymore. It's becoming an entire Mortal Kombat experience. But we're not done yet. Because if there's one thing about this Frankenstein game that I think we're missing, it's something completely ridiculous. And this is where Mortal Kombat Armageddon comes in. Because, in Armageddon, I'm going to take the most ridiculous game mode from that game. And I'm not talking the character creator. I'm not taking the giant roster. Not even the creative fatality or something like that. I'm taking something much more important to me. And that's motor combat. You heard me right. Motor combat. Because I don't care how serious our story gets. I need our tiny little Mortal Kombat chibis driving go-karts around and murdering each other. Sometimes you're going to spend 2 hours fighting for the fate of the realms. And sometimes you're just going to need to watch Scorpion get flattened by a giant obstacle. And honestly, that's exactly what I want. Mortal Kombat has always had this ridiculous side to it. You could have the darkest story imaginable and then immediately turn around and have a minigame where Sub-Zero is driving a go-kart. And somehow it works, So Mortal Kombat is officially going into our perfect Mortal Kombat game, because if we're going to build the ultimate MK, we're going to need to have something fun to do when we're tired of getting our ass kicked online. And now that we got all the serious stuff and some of the ridiculous stuff, we need to make the actual fights feel like a cinematic experience. And this is where the iconic but controversial Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe comes in. This one was a hard one to pick for me because I felt like Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe sort of got outclassed in almost every way by other Mortal Kombat games, but I picked something. I found something that this game does well, and it's the cinematic clashes. I'm talking, the environmental transitions, the big impacts, and those moments where the game suddenly feels like a movie. I think this would fit perfectly into our game, especially with like the darker atmosphere we already took from MK4, and I'm not talking like a superhero way, I'm talking maybe in a darker way, like maybe just like stage transitions. Like imagine knocking somebody through a wall or launching them across the arena and continuing the fight somewhere completely different. It would make the stages feel like actual environments instead of just backgrounds. So now we've got the combat, the story, the adventure modes, and even cinematic fights, but now we need to make the story itself feel like a blockbuster, and that's where MK9 comes in. And for this game, there was one thing that absolutely had to make it into our Frankenstein Mortal Kombat, and I chose the story mode, of course, because MK9 was one of the first games to show everybody that a fighting game could have a legitimate cinematic story. Instead of picking a character and watching a few slideshow endings after you finish the arcade ladder, you're actually playing through the story, sort of like a movie. You jump between different characters as different chapters, and you experience the events from different perspectives. You could get, big cinematic moments, and then you're just thrown straight into a fight. It looks cool, and that's exactly what I want for our perfect Mortal Kombat. Remember all the tournaments we established all the way back in the original MK1, like that setting? Now we're going to tell that story like Mortal Kombat 9, basically like MK9's story. We could have chapters focused on different characters, different rivalries, different parts of the tournament, and different events happening across the realms. And because we're using a tournament as the foundation, we could actually make the player feel like they're progressing through the competition. Maybe you could start with the early fights, and as you move through the tournament, and eventually you'll reach the bigger fights in the game, maybe like Shao Kahn, or maybe the harder jobbers, like maybe like Reptile or someone else. And I want the story to have these moments where you're watching a cinematic thinking, okay, this is awesome, this is getting crazy, and then immediately after that, you're playing the fight yourself. That's what made MK9's story mode so memorable. It didn't just tell you the story, it made you play it. So now our Frankenstein Mortal Kombat has a proper tournament, a massive adventure mode, co-op, cinematic clashes, and now we've got the story mode to tie everything together. But there's still a major problem. A game could have the greatest story and the coolest modes in the world, but what if the actual fighting doesn't feel incredible? None of it matters because this is a fighting game at the end of the day. The gameplay is the core aspect of the game, and that's where Mortal Kombat X comes in. So now that we're pretty late in Mortal Kombat X, let's recap, and I think this is where we need to make a pretty big decision, because we have already built a story, we built the modes, we built the atmosphere, but none of that matters if the actual fighting isn't fun. So for MKX, I'm taking the gameplay style and momentum, because MKX felt fast, you know, the movement was quick, the combos were aggressive, and the game rewarded you for constantly being on the offensive, and that's exactly what I want for our perfect Mortal Kombat. Remember that run mechanic that we took from Mortal Kombat 3? Now combine that with the Mortal Kombat X movement and gameplay philosophy. Our game would be fast, aggressive, and extremely fluid. I want you to be able to move around the arena quickly, get in your opponent's face and just start pressure, and actually feel like you're controlling the pace of a fight. And because we're bringing back the 3 fighting styles from Deadly Alliance, there's going to be a ridiculous amount of depth here. You could have the same character played 3 completely different ways with each of the fighting styles, you know, having that fast, aggressive MKX style gameplay, and that's something I think would make this Frankenstein game incredibly fun to actually master. But because we've got the casual side of Mortal Kombat, and underneath that there's a serious fighting game waiting for people who want to learn everything, perhaps from the most competitive fighting game, or most competitive Mortal Kombat fighting game I should say, ever made, and that's Mortal Kombat X, right? And now I think we finally got the actual gameplay for our perfect Mortal Kombat starting to come together. We built these incredible modes, and eventually you're going to unlock a ton of stuff, a lot of cosmetics. So where do we put that? That's where Mortal Kombat 11 comes in, a more controversial game in the franchise, because with all this content we have in our game, we're going to need something that gives the player a reason to keep coming back. And you know, for MK11, I'm taking probably the best thing about this game, or the best innovation, and that's the Crypt. Have you guys played the Crypt? The Crypt is one of those modes that can make you feel like there's always something to discover. You're not just fighting matches over and over and over again. In Mortal Kombat 11's Crypt, you're actually exploring, you're opening chests scattered around everywhere, you're unlocking costumes, finding concept art, you're discovering music, fatalities, intros, outros, gear, and sometimes you're just wandering around wondering what the hell you're supposed to do next, like it's a puzzle. And that's exactly what I want, but I want to take it even further. Imagine combining the Crypt with everything we've already built. You've got the Conquest mode for exploring the actual Mortal Kombat universe, but then you've got the Crypt as this massive mystery-filled location where you could unlock all of the game's secrets and rewards. I want the Crypt to actually have some secrets again. None of that invasions BS. I want some hidden rooms, hidden fights, rare unlockables, maybe even some characters or cosmetics that you could only discover by exploring. Give me a reason to actually look around instead of just following a waypoint telling me exactly where to go. Because after putting this much content into our perfect Mortal Kombat, I want the game to reward the people who actually want to dig into it. So now we've got almost everything. We've got the story, the gameplay, the modes, the atmosphere, we've got the customization and the unlockable content. But for the final game, there's one final piece. And honestly, this might be the most important one, the roster. And for that, we're going all the way to Mortal Kombat 1, the most modern entry, the reboot. Now, I'm taking something pretty different from this game. I'm taking the roster philosophy, because there's one thing I really like about MK1's roster that brought together a really interesting mix of classic characters and characters from the 3D era, and that's something I want to build on. Because if we're making the perfect Mortal Kombat, I don't want to keep pretending that the 3D era didn't happen. Give me the classic characters, give me the fan favorites, but also give me characters like Havoc, Ashura, Raiko, Li Mei, Natara, and all of those characters that deserve another shot. I want the roster to feel like a celebration of the entire franchise, not just the same 10 characters we've seen a million times. And screw those cameos, you know, put those cameos into the main roster. Like, give us back Sonya, Kano, Jax, give us Mavado, people like that, because now we've taken something from every era and we're putting it all into one game. But what does this game actually look like? What does the final roster look like? What does the story look like? And most importantly, after taking all of these ideas from over 30 years of Mortal Kombat, did we actually create the perfect Mortal Kombat? Because I think this game could be an absolutely insane Mortal Kombat game. It takes the things that made each era special without completely throwing throwing away what came before it. But obviously this is my version of the perfect Mortal Kombat, and I'm sure there's something on this list that you're sitting there thinking, okay, Mike, what the hell were you thinking? And that's exactly what I want to know. If you could remove one thing from my Frankenstein Mortal Kombat list and replace it with something else, what are you changing? Because I do know Mortal Kombat fans, and I already know this comment section is going to be a bloodbath. So let me know what your perfect Mortal Kombat would be. But if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to join the Mr. Frosty Flames Legion. Thank you guys for watching. Mr. Frosty Flames out. Ciao.